An oil rig in the North Sea is covered by a strange fog that makes some people act strangely. Soon they discover the fog has brought a dangerous spore that has infected employees and makes them act like that, even killing a few of them. This spore is a parasite sent by the ancestor, the oldest organism on Earth who was woken up by the drilling. The oil company has always known about this problem but kept it quiet to hide it from the public. Soon the ancestor causes a submarine landslide and the whole team has to be evacuated in helicopters. The rig is brought down by a tsunami while the group flies to a new location. They can't go to the mainland because it's being hit by a wave too. Once they make it to the new rig in the Arctic, the employees are put in isolation except for Fulmer and Kat, who are sent to the med bay because they may be infected. Fulmer keeps having nightmares about the ancestor and can sense a strong rage, which may confirm it wants revenge against humanity. The isolated survivors watch the news and learn that the tsunami has destroyed several coastal cities in different countries across Europe. Eventually, Coke shows up with a big announcement. They can go home in a helicopter and even take a $200,000 compensation package, but they can't discuss what really happened on the rig. If they don't sign the contract, they aren't allowed to leave. Magnus and Rose are taken out of isolation and informed they must stay because they were the other rig's leaders and now the company wants them here. At that moment, CEO Morgan arrives and explains this rig is actually a mine. They've always wanted to mine the seabed but never had adequate technology until now. They want to find rare minerals that could help them develop renewable technology. Rose thinks it could be bad for Earth, for Morgan assures her that going this deep is actually safer than regular mining. The only problem has been the contact with the ancestor. Morgan plays a recording of a survey team that went missing after finding the ancestor under the ice. They were near the mid-Atlantic ridge on a steep drop known as the Abyssal Plain, which is 4,500 meters down. The landslide broke the umbilical cord and the team now has around 2 hours of oxygen left. They've narrowed down the team's location to a specific area and want Magnus and Rose's help with the rescue. Rose protests since the company almost left them to die in the other rig, but now they claim they need them. So Morgan assures her she didn't know about the tsunami until it was too late. Obviously, Rose doesn't believe her since Coke had known about the ancestor, and Morgan explains she's been trying to change to clean energies but received lots of pushback from the company board, meaning they're keeping her in the dark about some matters. If Rose wants things to work out with the ancestor, cooperating with Morgan is her only option. Rose agrees in exchange for Fulmer and Kat being released from the medical bay. Most of the employees in isolation sign the contract and get to leave. However, a small group stays because they don't want the company controlling what they can talk about. Magnus comes to inform them Rose is in charge of the rig now and recruits them for the rescue mission. They take an elevator to a state-of-the-art underground facility and are amazed by the advanced equipment there. Meanwhile, Morgan is trying to convince Kat to sign the contract, pointing out she shouldn't be here while she's pregnant and promising to help her find her missing wife. Kat is hesitant because the contract is full of lies, like saying she didn't get hurt during the incident. In the end, both her and the rebellious Hutton sign. Morgan brings them along with the rest of the survivors who sign to finally leave the rig in a helicopter. The missing team only has 1 hour 15 minutes of oxygen left, so they need to hurry. Dive technician Kyle warns them that the water down there is cold enough to give them frostbite on touch. Heather explores the facility and finds a mysterious lab where she meets Oscar, the lead scientist. He has orders to study the seabed minerals, but he's more interested in the ancestor, as proven by his sample jars. Rose chooses Easter and Kyle to go on the mission. The men get in the rover and with only 50 minutes left they leave the facility to start the search. It's pretty dark out there and their lights don't reach very far, so they aren't moving fast. When there are only 15 minutes left they finally find the wreckage of the missing team's rover, which means they're all dead. Kyle and Easter want to investigate, but Magnus thinks it's a bad idea since they could be attacked. Coke disagrees and wants to retrieve the bodies, which triggers an argument. Ignoring that fight, Kyle decides to suit up and go on his own. He can't tell what could have caused this kind of damage, but he does find the bodies in the mission log. In the control room, the team gets worried because several minutes pass without news, but Kyle and Easter eventually confirm they've gathered everything and are on their way back. Heather and Harish go looking for Oscar to give him the news only to discover that the spore samples are going crazy, which means something's triggering the ancestor. The duo rushes back to warn the others, but they aren't taken seriously. Suddenly, tendrils of spores appear near the rover. Easter tries to go faster, but the spores surround the vehicle and make it freeze while they start attacking it, causing several functions to fail. When the team tries to pull the rover back into the facility, the spores disconnect the cord and make the machine short-circuit. The rest of the team loses both visuals and comms with the rover right before the glass starts cracking. Kyle pushes Easter into the adjacent compartment and activates a sonar pulse, which instantly scares the spores away. The noise also makes Fulmer's head hurt because he's slowly becoming more in tune with the ancestor, and another vision flashes for a second. Now the group can use the radio again and confirm Kyle and Easter are fine, but they don't know how long the cracked glass will last. They don't have another rover to rescue them, so Coke concludes they must move the rig toward them. The plan is to place some explosives that will break the ice and allow the rig to move using propulsion. Magnus, Bremner, and Fulmer suit up and leave the facility with the explosives before Coke begins lowering the rig on the ice. The trio works as fast as possible to install all the bombs and mark each spot with a little flag. Unfortunately, the ice isn't stable enough and Fulmer realizes it's starting to crack. There's some rumbling and Bremner theorizes the waves caused by the rig moving are breaking the ice from underneath. Magnus is determined to get this done, so he runs and quickly slides across the ice to reunite with Fulmer. Bremner is afraid and walks slowly, so the ice breaks under him and he falls into the resulting hole. Fulmer and Magnus crawl on the ice to reach Bremner and grab his hands to prevent him from drowning. The detonator falls into the water and Magnus has to retrieve it, burning his hand. Bremner is successfully taken out of the hole and now the trio can finish installing the explosives. Once it's all ready, Rose gives the order and they detonate the bombs, which proceed to break a large area of ice just as planned. The rig activates the propulsion system and swiftly moves without any issues. Moments later, both rovers are rescued and all the dead bodies are retrieved from the wreckage. Kyle and Easter are fine, but Kyle keeps the mission log a secret. Magnus tries to befriend him, however Kyle doesn't trust him. In his room, Fulmer is still dealing with strange visions. In the meantime, Morgan asks Kat and Hutton for one last job before sending them home. They make it to a casualty clearing center where survivors from the destroyed cities are sent by rescuers. Kat wants to start searching for her wife, but Morgan makes her and Hutton join a press conference first. At the rig, Rose is frustrated because she's looking at all the information in the system but can't find anything on the ancestor, which means Coke is hiding it. At the same time, Coke is also checking the system to find the rover's mission log, but the data appears corrupted. Rose and Magnus show up to scold him for what they're doing to Earth since it'll end badly, but Coke thinks this will help humanity survive. To distract them, he points out Fulmer is acting strange, forcing him to admit he's still connected to the ancestor. At that moment, the press conference begins and the crew is shocked to watch Kat read the lies written by the company's PR team. It's supposed to give the general population some hope, yet Magnum and his team think she betrayed them. Rose disagrees and thinks Morgan is protecting her fight for clean energy from the rest of the company, but Magnus points out Morgan could have said what Rose wanted to hear to keep her in the rig instead of going around spreading confidential information. After the conference, Kat goes looking for his wife with Hutton's help. There are hundreds of wounded people and there isn't a register yet. A doctor sends her to the gate, where survivors are hanging signs looking for their loved ones. Kat finally snaps and has a breakdown, so Hutton tries to comfort her. At the rig, Heather calls Easter and Harish to show them footage of the spot where they found the crashed rover. There's no evidence of any mining actually happening, so there's a secret reason why the rover was sent to that area. Bremner asks Kyle for the mission log, but Kyle swears he didn't bring it. Rose keeps trying to call Morgan, however the CEO is ignoring her calls. When Fulmer checks on her, she snaps at him for hiding his connection. An argument ensues and Rose sends Fulmer away. Heather calls Magnus to inform him of her discovery and he orders his team to find all the employees to have a serious talk. Kyle overhears this and immediately hides. When Heather makes it to the lab looking for Oscar, she finds Coke scolding him for interacting with the crew. She interrupts them, but Coke refuses to listen to her and stomps off. Afterward, Oscar brings everyone to his lab to share more details. The ancestor is an ancient living network threaded through the seabed, which Oscar has confirmed after analyzing samples from both rigs. This means the ancestor is connected to the whole planet and a sign nature is fighting against the mining. The rover had been sent to find the right nons, hoping they could inject them with poison to kill the ancestor, meaning it's been attacking in self-defense all along. Coke and Bremner listen to all this by watching the security cameras and they conclude they must get rid of Fulmer because his connection is probably sending information to the ancestor. Meanwhile, Kyle checks the data in the mission log and finds a project called Siren, which appears to be in Phase 2. It also says location confirmed, so Kyle realizes Coke sent his crewmates on the rover already knowing the risks. Later, the spores sample start glowing in the lab, but it's just Rose having a nightmare. In the meantime, Fulmer keeps comparing the footage from the lost rover and Easter's. The noise made by the ancestor gives him headaches and visions until he passes out. The team rushes him to the medical bay and the doctor does a quick checkup, but he can't find anything. After the rest of the team leaves the room, Fulmer tells Rose he heard the noise in his own head together with several voices on top of each other. Rose thinks it may be a message and they should analyze it, but Fulmer refuses to go through that pain again. At the casualty center, Hutton and Kat fail to find her wife among all the refugees. Kat decides to enter the tent with all the unidentified bodies, but thankfully she doesn't find her wife there either, which means she hasn't been rescued yet. Afterward, Kat uses her experience as a nurse to help around with the survivors, and Hutton finds the wife of a fallen teammate to give her some letters he found in the guy's room. He feels bad because the woman asks for answers and he can't give her any. Back to the rig, Harish manages to hack into the system's encrypted files and shows his discoveries to Magnus and Rose. The deep-sea mining operation is way bigger than they thought. It's not just one mining site here, it's a whole region. The company is trying to grab as many rights as possible to have a monopoly on resources when the ancestor brings the apocalypse. Rose still thinks Morgan is trying to stop that, but Magnus and Harish think she's blind. At the same time, Morgan meets with Darian, one of the company's investors. He warns her that the board is watching, so she needs to be more careful and make sure there won't be any more complications. This confirms she's part of the conspiracy, although she is wary about the Arctic plan. Coke visits Fulmer at the med bay and tells him about all the employees they lost when they first encountered the ancestor. He believes he can get the organism out of Fulmer with the serum he's been working on since the first attack. Coke also points out Fulmer's connection makes him a risk to every mission. Bremner is searching Kyle's things for the log and is caught red-handed by Easter. A furious Bremner asks where Kyle is, but Easter refuses to answer, so he leaves. Then Bremner tells Coke about his failure, so Coke offers Fulmer a deal. He'll get the medicine if he steals the log from Kyle. At the same time, Easter finds Kyle to tell him about Bremner. In return, Kyle tells him about the brother he lost and how angry he's at Coke for sending the crew to their deaths. On his way back, Easter bumps into Fulmer, and since he doesn't suspect his friend, he tells him where Kyle is. However, Kyle immediately can tell Fulmer wants the log and threatens to destroy it. Fulmer promises he only wants the log to bring Coke down, and Kyle decides to give it to him. On his way out, Kyle is jumped on by Bremner, who tries to kill him by choking him. Coke turns the cameras off for this. After some struggle, Kyle passes out, but he's only faking as a distraction. He hits Bremner a couple of times and leaves the room, breaking the lock to leave Bremner locked inside. In the control room, Heather and Harish play a noise from the rover recordings on loop, which is the same noise that made Fulmer pass out. Oskil deduces that it's the ancestor talking, but they need to be careful in responding because a strange entity may not understand a message coming from humans. Fulmer brings the log to Coke and notices he has a compartment just for weapons. He tries stealing one, but at that moment Coke checks the contents of the log. It turns out Kyle gave him a fake, so a furious Coke grabs a weapon and goes searching for him. When he finds him, he immediately attacks, but Kyle defends himself and a fight begins. At first it looks like Kyle has the upper hand, but Coke manages to overpower him and throws him on the floor to start choking him. While Fulmer sees the fight on the security cameras, Kyle pushes Coke off and takes out a knife to slash his arm. At that moment, Harish enters the room and Coke is distracted, so Kyle stabs his neck. A dying Coke stumbles and falls into the freezing water. Afterward, the rest of the team ties Kyle up. Magnus and Rose ask him for an explanation, but Kyle refuses to talk. Then the duo interrogates Bremner, who is watching footage of the fight. They ask why they had to free him from a locked room, so Bremner tells them he only tried to talk to Kyle, but the guy turned aggressive. He also tells them Fulmer had a deal with Coke but refuses to elaborate. Rose immediately goes to find Fulmer and gets angry when she hears about the serum. She thinks Fulmer is the only chance they have to communicate with the ancestor, but he points out he's constantly in pain and the link could kill him. Fulmer also says that in the end he didn't grab the serum and his plan was to bring the log to Rose because it supposedly has the location to find the ancestor. He's tired of Rose always snapping at him, so he breaks up with her. Magnus calls Morgan to inform her of the murder and she tells him to wait for instructions because she has to deal with the authorities. While Rose comes to tell Magnus about the log, Bremner calls Darian to inform him of Coke's murder. Darian immediately goes to see Morgan, shocking her when he reveals he knows and scolding her for not telling the board. He wants to shut it all down before the press and the authorities learn about it, wanting to keep it a secret and avoid an investigation. At the casualty center, Kat continues to help the doctors with the incoming survivors, but she's devastated to hear from a rescuer that they'll stop searching soon because all hospitals are at capacity and there are no resources. Hutton comforts her through another breakdown and they both realize they need to stop protecting the company. They talk to journalist Emma and tell her the entire truth. Emma believes them and wants to cover the story, but they need to find some evidence first. While Osko keeps on analyzing the signal, Magnus interrogates Kyle again. A furious Kyle begins ranting, explaining that Coke sacrificed a lot of people for his plan and was willing to sacrifice more, so he killed him to avoid more death. That tsunami was Coke's fault and the information on that log could cause even more disasters. However, Magnus is still skeptical. Afterward, Magnus returns to the office with Rose and Bremner to take a call from Morgan, who tells them a chopper will pick up the body and this won't be discussed anymore. She calls it a situation and a workplace accident, which makes Rose angry. Morgan ignores her and hangs up. Rose and Magnus finally accept that Morgan is against them and ask Bremner to unlock the comms, because they've been locked to stop them from calling outsiders. However, Bremner refuses, saying he's afraid of what the company will do to him. Then Rose goes to see Fulmer to apologize and ask for his help, but he turns her down too. Magnus talks to Easter, begging him to share anything he knows about Kyle. Later, some crew members are outside chatting and are suddenly horrified to discover the ice is bleeding. Magnus is called over and Oskil explains the movement of the rig has created pressure ridges in the ice that have exposed hidden parts. There's no pollution in this area, so Oskil wonders if it's the ancestor and if he can investigate. Magnus says no because of the blizzard, but Rose agrees this may be their only chance to get answers. After scolding Rose for wanting to put more people in danger, Magnus frees Kyle because of what Easter told him about his family. Magnus also tells him the company won't arrest him, so Kyle should choose wisely. He can either keep on being secretive or share the log so they can all bring the company together. In the meantime, Darian informs Morgan that the board has met without her and they've decided she'll step down when this crisis is over. Darian will be taking on operational duties, including finalizing the deal Morgan managed to secure for the Arctic. Morgan threatens to go public with all the information, but Darian points out the company will destroy her career and she'll never find work again. At the rig, Magnus is called to the control room because Oskar has gone out to check the strange ice. Magnus uses the radio to ask him to come back, but since Oskar ignores him, he'll have to rescue him himself. Heather volunteers to come along to protect him from the bears because she's a good shooter. They leave in a car and use a digital compass for guidance since visibility is awful because of the storm. Heather still notices that the cracks in the ice are getting bigger. Meanwhile, Fulmer talks to Bremner and tells him he's taken the serum so he can't feel the ancestor anymore. He wants out and is ready to make a deal, but Bremner needs some time to think about it. Minutes later, Bremner gets a call from Darian, who asks him to work for him and promises a good reward plus protection. Outside, the team finds Oskar taking samples in a tent and running tests on a small machine. This area isn't supposed to be polluted, but the test results find proof of it anyway, which means the drilling project caused it. If they don't stop it soon, it'll spread to all the oceans in the world. The storm is getting worse and the ice is getting unstable, so the group convinces Oskar to go back. They get in the car and notice it's even harder to see now, not to mention the compass has stopped working. When they try the GPS, it isn't working either. The car ends up getting lost, so they call the rig and the team turns on the lights for them, but they aren't strong enough to be seen from afar during a blizzard. In the lab, Rose notices the spores starting to get agitated, so she rushes back to the comms room and tells them the ancestor is about to attack. At that moment, they can see the spores approaching and the ice cracking under them. The car speeds up to try to lose them and Magnus has to pull off some crazy moves to steer the car away from the cracks appearing around them. All this moving allows them to finally find the rig lights, but when the car turns in that direction, a huge piece of ice rises and blocks their way. Thankfully, Magnus stops the car just in time. They can see the spores gathering under the ice, so Oskar leaves the car and dunks his headphones in the water while playing the ancestor's signal. When they hear this, the spores swim away until their glow can't see anymore, although the group hears a new noise coming from the water. Now they can continue to travel safely. That night, Emma meets with Kat and Hutton to tell them that the distress call they sent from the rig before the tsunami came was deleted from all the logs. The conversation is interrupted by a doctor who informs Kat that they've found her wife. Her condition is serious, but she's stable and even recognizes Kat, who starts crying. There isn't much hope because all hospitals are full and the wife needs better treatment. At the rig, Kyle tells Rose that he agrees to show her all the info in the log, including a drone designed to take out the ancestor. Suddenly, Bremner comes in and threatens them both with a gun, which is seen by Harish on the security screen. Bremner shoots the camera and the noise alerts Fulmer, who sees what's happening through a window and begins sneaking around. Harish calls Easter and warns him while finding footage from a different angle. Fulmer soon joins Harish and looks for weapons, only to discover Bremner has taken them all. Rose keeps trying to negotiate with Bremner, who insists he's joined the winning side and wants the log. At the same time, Darian tries to contact him to no avail, and Morgan finds all her permissions revoked from the system. Suddenly, Hutton storms into the room and pushes Darian off to reach Morgan, insulting her for deleting the distress call and telling her to check the tents to see the consequences of her actions. Morgan does exactly that and notices the poor conditions everybody is in, so she makes some calls to get help. In just a few hours, more doctors arrive with medicine to help Kat's wife. Still feeling guilty, Morgan gives Kat a USB drive with evidence to incriminate the company. Now she has to leave in a helicopter before Darian catches her, and Hutton goes with her. Soon Magnus and his team arrive at the rig and Easter tells them what's happening. While they try to think of a plan, Bremner gets ready to shoot Rose, so Kyle finally agrees to show him the spot in the lab where he hid the log. Bremner is suspicious, so he uses the speakers to tell the entire crew to evacuate to the subsea module. While people move around, Magnus uses the chance to hide behind the crowd and sneak around with Heather's gun. He makes it to the security room and makes a plan with Fulmer. They'll move together while Harish updates them on Bremner's location by watching the cameras. In the med bay, Oskar and Heather are experimenting with the spores, unaware of what's happening. Oskar puts a microphone inside the jar of samples and plays the signal, which causes them to move in very specific patterns. The spores appear to be in pain, so they conclude the signal is an anger. It's a cry for help. Kyle guides Bremner and Rose to the lab, and when they take the stairs, Rose grabs a fire extinguisher to strike Bremner. As he falls, Rose empties the extinguisher as a distraction before throwing it to strike him again. Then she activates the flood alarm and runs away with Kyle. This emergency system blocks out all the doors, leaving Magnus and Fulmer on a different level. Using the cameras, Harish tells them of a different corridor they can use. Bremner manages to recover quickly and crosses the door by the stairs before it closes. Rose and Kyle are now stuck in the lab, and Kyle confesses he lied about the log being there. It's actually in the ore processing room. Bremner finds a power box and cuts the energy in the whole facility except for the emergency protocols. Fulmer cuts some wires near a door and manages to open it, so now he and Magnus can keep moving. In another corridor, they find a broken panel, indicating Bremner must be close. In the lab, Kyle and Rose realize the heater is out too, so if they aren't saved soon they'll freeze to death. They hide when they hear Bremner reaching the door and trying to open it to no avail. Suddenly Bremner also hears a noise and runs to hide. The duo arrives at the lab too and Fulmer tinkers with another panel to open the door. The group reunites and agrees to go to our processing to find the log, which is overheard by Bremner. After a short walk, they make it to the right room and Kyle takes the log from its hiding spot. As he hands it to Rose, the power comes back. Then the group goes to the subsea module and finds Bremner holding Harish hostage. Rose offers the log and when they're about to do the exchange, Fulmer jumps on Bremner and they start fighting for the gun. In the struggle, the weapon is accidentally fired and the bullet hits Rose. Magnus and Fulmer run to check on her, giving Bremner the chance to grab the log and run away. Kyle rushes to get help, but it's too late. Rose bleeds out in Fulmer's arms. However, to their surprise, the bullet begins dematerializing and the wound closes as she has a vision of the ancestor's heart. When she wakes up, Fulmer realizes she's infected herself with the spores. Moments later, Bremner contacts Darian to tell him he has the log, and Darian texts the board to inform them they can launch Project Siren too soon. Rose is taken to the medbay and she explains to Fulmer that she fully understands now. The ancestor didn't cause the mass extinctions of the past as they thought. It's actually what allowed life to regenerate after a tragedy. If the company destroys its heart, it'll equal the end of life as they know it. Meanwhile, Kat gives the USB drive to Emma and they examine the content together. They find a video from Morgan admitting all the things the company has been doing. Soon the video appears on every channel and Darian receives a panicking call from the board. Reporters start following him everywhere and a message from the board tells him the deal is off if he doesn't fix the situation. At the rig, Magnus searches for Bremner and fails to find him, so he goes back to his team to watch the news too. At that moment a helicopter arrives bringing Hutton and Morgan. She admits she blocked the distress call from the first rig, but back then she hadn't known what Coke had really been planning and now she regrets helping him. Morgan's plans were to win the rights over the Arctic and sit on them to stop the company from using them. She tells them about Darian and all the board members, pointing out that if they'd told the public about the ancestor from the beginning, the company would have made it look like an enemy. The board has a drone, the Poison, that can be launched from everywhere, so if Bremner gives them the log with the location of the ancestor's heart then there's no hope. The conversation is interrupted by Darian appearing on the news to blame Morgan for all the things the company did, claiming the board didn't know about it. Rose concludes there's only one way to fight this. They must go to the heart and show it to the general public to gain their sympathy. If it works, society will want to protect the ancestor and stop the company. The team gathers to discuss how to proceed. Kyle remembers the location of the heart, but when Bremner cut power he destroyed the navigation system so the rig can't reach it. However, Rose points out the rover should be able to reach it, so Kyle and Hutturn agree to start working on fixing it while Osko will find a way to reprogram the signal to use it as protection. While the whole crew works hard together, Fulmer expresses his support and tells Rose he'll come too. Once the rover is ready, Rose and Fulmer go down and have to drive very slowly since it's very dark around them. Meanwhile, Magnus is worried about Bremner and wonders if he's waiting for them to find the heart to shoot the poison, so he goes looking for him again. In another room, Bremner is getting the poison ready and follows the map from the log to guide the drone. He sends Darian a text so he can follow the drone too. Minutes later, Kyle and Harish find something in the radar near the rover, but it doesn't match the signal from the previous attacks. Morgan realizes it's a drone sent by Bremner and warns Rose, who forces the rover to go faster even if it consumes more power. The drone continues to follow them and Rose realizes the signal is protecting it too, so she turns it off. Bremner loses track of the heart, but it's desperate to finish the plan and makes the drone shoot the poison anyway. At that moment, Magnus finds him and before Bremner can grab his gun, he shoots him in the shoulder to bring him down. Then Magnus checks the computer and discovers the poison has already been shot. Darian sees the same thing and closes his deal with the board. Underwater, Fulmer and Rose hear the ancestor crying in pain, so they stop the rover. After getting an update from Magnus, Morgan calls them to give them the bad news and tells them to go back. Rose refuses to give up even though the rover only has 50% of power left, which means they won't be able to return. She points out that not helping the ancestor will mean death for humanity anyway, so Fulmer turns off the radio and agrees to help. At the rig, Magnus tells his team to turn off all non-essential systems to reroute the power. The duo turns the rover back on and keeps advancing until they find a cliff. Fulmer thinks this is over, but Rose notices some weird roots on the seabed and decides to suit up to investigate. When she's close enough, she picks up a rock that instantly disintegrates. Then she touches the roots and reminds the ancestor that if it could heal her, it can heal itself too. The roots begin glowing and reveal the heart standing in the middle of the cliff. It's extremely tall and its million roots spread in every direction. Suddenly the area goes dark and Fulmer reminds Rose the rover is almost out of power, but Rose says this isn't over yet. After healing itself from the poison, the ancestor begins glowing more brightly than ever. The light reaches the frozen surface and soon all the oceans around the world show the same phenomenon. Every channel broadcasts the glowing seas and society can finally see the truth. In just a few hours, Darian receives a bunch of notifications saying that the government will investigate the company, that oil prices are going down, and that the Arctic energy stocks have been cancelled. He also receives a call from his superior that terrifies him. Afterward, Rose returns to the rover to wait for the end with Fulmer since there's only 1% of battery left. As the power goes out, the couple reconciles and kisses. Suddenly, a light appears nearby and they realize Magnus has moved the rig with a rerouted power to save them. In the morning, Morgan tells the crew this isn't over because the powerful people behind the company will want revenge. However, the crew is ready to fight anything that comes after them. In the sky, a mysterious satellite finds their location. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.